In fact, that's why if you talk to some experts, they'll say pornography is one of the most difficult habits to break, sometimes harder than crack cocaine. If you're addicted to it, they'll say. Because what happens when you take a drug? It feels good the first time to get the same high. What do you have to do? You have to take more or a harder drug. The same is true with pornography. The same images or videos don't give me the same high, so I have to watch more. I have to watch harder stuff. And it leads to an addiction in the same way that drugs does. I'll quit later. Can you see how naive this is? There's another chemical in the body called oxytocin, and it's actually known as the bonding hormone. The bonding hormone. It's in men and women, but primarily in women. Now, what does it do? Oxytocin is released in the body of a woman, and it creates this natural desire to bond with a man. So it's a chemical release in the body, and they've actually done studies. I saw they were watching people play financial games where you invest your money, you have to trust people, and they snuck oxytocin into people's drinks, and those who drank it were more likely to trust other people with their finances than those who didn't. A chemical in the body actually causes you, in a sense, to trust others. Now, what does the Bible say? In Genesis 1, it says, be fruitful and multiply. One purpose of sex is for babies. The second purpose in Genesis 2, it says what? What? The two shall leave their mother and their father and become one. See, in sexual activity, it's not just a spiritual oneness, it's a bodily oneness, it's an emotional oneness, it's a spiritual oneness, and it's a biochemical oneness. You see, a woman, oxytocin is released in her body primarily in 3 times. Number 1, when she gives birth. So my wife is pregnant. She's due in a few weeks. When she gives birth, I told her, I said, hey, I'll do this one for you, but she didn't take me up on it. Just kidding. When she's given birth, I said, I'll take this one for the team. Her body's going to be flooded with oxytocin. That's where you get this idea of a motherly bond. And then when you nurse, ladies, your bodies are flooded with oxytocin, this desire to connect with a child. And third, during sexual activity, chemicals are released that cause you to desire this sense of connection and closeness and intimacy with that person. In fact, it's not just in sexual activity. It's in an affectionate hug, affectionate rub on the back, in a kiss. That's why I tell my students, or I say to the girls, I say, look, if you don't think you're going to trust a guy, don't even hug him. Because your body is being flooded with chemicals that make you desire that sense of closeness. And people say, I'll quit later. Do you see how naive this is? See, what happens is somebody who has oxytocin released at certain times, when they look at pornography, it damages the mechanism that when you get married to one person for life, the chemical has been damaged, released at inopportune times, and is not there to help you bond with your spouse in the way God designed it to be. I'll quit later? It's kind of like, I forgot it this time, but if you have tape and you put duct tape on your arm and you rip it off, it hurts the first time. What if you put it on a second time? Hurts a little less. Third, fourth time, it doesn't hurt anymore. Why? It's lost its stickiness. See, oxytocin is a chemical that helps people bond. But when I have multiple sexual partners, or I look at pornography on the internet, it damages the bonding mechanism in my body that God has placed there to help the two become one. I'll quit later? Do you see how naive this is? See, in men, there's a chemical called vasopressin. It's the equivalent. And it's actually called the monogamy molecule. They call it that. In fact, in men, it causes the man to desire to be faithful to his wife and to love the kids. It actually brings a connection between the man and his wife and his kids. Now, there's a certain animal in nature that has vasopressin. Interestingly enough, it's called a prairie vole. Do you know these hamsters are monogamous? They find a partner and stay faithful to it for life. And they look inside it and they find vasopressin all over these little prairie voles. So they've done experiments. They go in and they have a prairie vole find his partner. They're staying faithful to it. They remove the vasopressin and guess what happens? The little hamster starts sleeping around. Do you see the power of the chemical? Now, we're not just animals in that sense, but it deeply shapes and influences our behavior. And yet when we look at pornography, when we're engaged in multiple sexual partners, the bonding mechanism God has placed there becomes damaged. And yet people say, I will just simply quit later. That's incredibly, incredibly naive. In fact, Michael Leahy, I think I put a picture up here, he wrote an incredible book called Porn Nation. And he tells a story about how he grew up at 11 years old, was first exposed to pornography. And for his whole life, it was just a consistent part of his life, and he hid it from people. Got married to a woman he loved, had kids. And finally, it led to him, he needed more and more and more hardcore pornography. Eventually, cheated on his wife. She found out about it, and she divorced him. He said he tried so many times to get better, and he couldn't. He said he couldn't get better until the point when he totally broke was when his wife found another man and got engaged. He said, that's when I realized it was done and he was broken and he was prepared to get better. But notice something Michael Leahy said. He said, the majority of college women I've spoken with tend to assume that most guys will eventually abandon pornography as well, especially when offered real sex as an alternative. But what most of today's college women don't understand is that it's unlikely many of their male counterparts will ever cease to have some kind of a relationship with pornography. You know why? Because to many men, pornography it's easier. A girl can turn you down. It takes work. She might cost money. She might not be in the mood. But pornography, she's always smiling, always available, get an instant fix, so to speak. That's why John Mayer, the singer, he said, I've kind of given up on having sex with women. It's a lot easier to just masturbate to porn. That's where our culture's going. It's too much work. Just be engaged in pornography. Do you see how naive it is to say, I'll quit later? Because the brain is involved.